Welcome to The Joy Factor, a podcast dedicated to helping you create a path to joyful living each and every day. Now, here's your host, therapist, life coach, and yoga teacher, Julie Hansen.
Hello, and welcome to episode 35 of The Joy Factor. My guest today is trauma specialist and substance abuse counselor, Stephanie Snyder. Stephanie offers a very interesting lens that she views substance abuse and addiction through. Her focus on helping clients feel safe, supported, and empowered really shines through in our conversation as she describes her work and just her perspective on healing. If you or someone you care about is currently struggling with substance abuse or is in recovery, I hope you'll give yourself the time to listen to her message and just consider how connected our joy factor is to our capacity for compassion, empathy, and care, not just for ourselves, but for each other. Welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, let's start by having you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what that phrase joy factor means to you personally.
So I've grown up in the Western Maryland area and am currently working in the trauma field. And I have a good amount of experience with mental health, trauma, and addiction. And so when I think about my work and how I've developed and helped navigate what my orientation to treatment is, my theory, my modality, all of those things, I do so with the mindset that healing is a mind, body, and soul experience. And so it kind of goes nicely with the joy factor, because when somebody starts that journey of healing and they go from a position of surviving to a position of thriving, they are able to see joy and beauty in the little things again. And so one of the measures that I personally use, and what I have seen happen with individuals that I've worked with for a long time, is that finding joy in the little things that life presents, and then that leads into joy into bigger things. And there's this saying in recovery, people will say, I can hear the birds sing again. It's like you have recovered enough and you have healed enough that you are noticing things that are outside of yourself. You're not so hyper-focused on what's right in front of you that you're able to sit still and experience everything that's going on around you.
That's beautiful. I can hear the birds singing again.
Yes.
And, it makes me think about that person who might be listening, who, like, many, millions of people who during these past few years, maybe they did sort of cross that line into using substances or, engaging in some other behavior as a coping strategy or as a way to manage stress, and are now sitting on the other side of that and getting feedback that, there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And just wondering if you would have just a couple of pointers for that person who maybe isn't quite ready to fully, accept or engage in some treatment, but the signs are there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know anybody who enjoys getting constructive feedback in a way that means I have to change something about myself, right? And so a couple of things come to mind. And first is the stigma associated not only with the mental health piece, but addiction. The word addiction, the word alcoholic or wino or druggie or any of those labels and names that people associate with struggling with substance use is so incredibly stigmatizing. There's this thing, whenever you put a label on something, it dehumanizes the person. So, part of having a person-centered approach and understanding that it's not the disease, it's the person. recognizing that no, it's not the alcoholism or the drug use. It's me as a person who is needing help in some way. Disorder means having disorder. There's no organization or, balance. It's a disorder of something, be it our mind, body, or spirit. And so if somebody came to me and said, you know what, Steph, past 6 months, you haven't been on top of your game. I've noticed you've been slacking off on your responsibilities. You've been late to appointments. I noticed that you're drinking a little bit extra wine in the evening, and it becomes a point where it's impacting my daily life. Yes, I'm going to be angry that somebody is accusing me of something, but am I angry at the person or am I angry at myself? And I'm going to have to figure that piece out. And then the next piece is, do I really want help at this time? Am I willing to put myself in a position of vulnerability to actually say, you know what, you're right, I do need help? And that's a very scary position to be in. And, it's up to the person to put themselves in that position to say, yes, I need help, and then figure out the next steps as to, well, how the heck do I get help? What do I do? Everybody wants to go to a meeting or something like that, but it may need more than that. It may need more intense support, and figuring out what that level of support is takes time, and it takes putting yourself in front of the right person.
Yeah. And just kind of to maybe ask another question around that, and thinking about, well, some people might say, okay, fine, I'll talk to somebody, but I'm not going to a meeting. And I don't have time for anything more. And just kind of curious, what would somebody expect if they did put themselves in front of a person to get some help? How does that first appointment go? So if I am, maybe fighting with my partner or some other family member telling me, you know what, you're drinking too much, you got to get some help. Yeah. And I call Stephanie Snyder and I make an appointment. What's going to happen then?
If they call me directly, I have a very gentle conversation with them. I find out what's been going on. I find out, what the concerns are that the family members or whoever the support person is that are bringing up to their attention. I'm going to ask them how they feel about all of that without sounding too much like a therapist. How do you feel about that? But honestly, how does somebody asking you these questions or making these statements to you make you feel? And is this something that you're wanting to explore further? Is this something you really want to take the time to navigate and not be afraid of what might come out? And in that conversation, I'm really trying hard to create a very safe, non-judgmental space for that person so that they don't feel scared or intimidated or further stigmatized for the courage and what brought them in the door, because courage is a huge piece of this. The first step is always the scariest. And then I would try to make sure to provide support as they do the intake and get all of the stuff in order that's necessary for them to continue to see me.
And then as far as, okay, I'm in the seat, I'm listening, you're showing me kindness. And then what would you be able to tell me, just again in general terms, about what might give me hope? What shifts for people once they are able to muster that courage, which we can only muster when we're afraid.
Right.
But they've, what might there be for them that would be a hopeful, just a hopeful nugget to hold on to?
Yeah. Well, it's different for everybody. And, a lot of times folks will enter into this type of treatment based on external motivation, like a fear of losing family connections, a fear of losing a job, a fear of potentially going to jail if they don't, seek treatment. But eventually, when somebody continues in treatment, their motivation starts to shift from external to internal. And you can start to see it happening in phases because they start to develop this self-worth that, you know what, I am more than the label that society has put on me. I am more than the label my family has put on me. And you start to see this little fire start to ignite, and their personality starts to emerge again. And they have a little bit more skip in their step, and it's in those little nuggets, it's in those little joy factors, right, that hope starts to, take root and grow and start to spring out. And it's different for everybody, but it only takes a small little glimmer for people to truly hold on to, and they hold on to it with all their might. And I just try to celebrate that and cheer them on, because when people come to sit with me and they start to talk about all of the things, I am somebody who meets them where they are, and I walk alongside of them until they get to where they want to be. This isn't my treatment. This is for them. And if they get to a point where they're like, you know what, Miss Steph, you've given it your best shot, we're good to go, peace out, then I have to be okay with that. But if somebody, and I'm walking along with them, and they want to keep moving on and they want to go on and continue to work on some other stuff, then we go there. But it's completely up to that person. And when that person has that hope and has that reignition of themselves, they're seeing themselves again for the first time, they feel empowered, and you want to continue to embrace and celebrate that. It's kind of like, Field of Dreams, when they said, if you build the field, they will come, or whatever. Mm-hmm. If you provide this space, empathetic listening, and that unconditional support, no judgment, if you provide the space, the person has the potential to grow and heal.
Great. And definitely connected to joy, right? Like that it's 100%. What about younger clients? And maybe what do we need to know if you're a parent or a caregiver of a teenager who is struggling in some form or fashion, either with a substance or, with a screen, whatever it might be that's kind of creating some problems? What do parents need to kind of have as a couple of guideposts or anchors when they're trying to help their child?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so many things came to my mind because I have so many parents. The desperate feeling of wanting to help your child is usually the first thing that I hear, either in person or through the phone. And a lot of times parents are trying to help and their child is over 18. But if your child is under 18, there's a little bit more things that the family unit can do together, has a little bit more say over treatment. A family needs to heal together. So it's not just one person that is impacted by this situation. The whole family unit is impacted. And so whenever one person is entering into recovery, treatment, or anything, then it is strongly recommended that the rest of the family also do their own treatment and coming together, both individually and then together as a family unit. I think, too, society has put so many expectations on us as parents. You have to have, in order to show love, there's that whole 5 love language thing that we can do. And they have, how do you receive and give love? But I think we have families who both parents are working either together or separated. We have, multiple siblings, sometimes with different parents, and then blended families. You have a lot of different social dynamics that come into play, and the expectations of, I need to have my child in all the sports. I need to have my child have all of the things. And this is how I show my child love because I'm working 2 jobs to pay for, it can get very exasperated. And then you have the mom that might stay at home, or the dad that might stay at home and do all the right things and packed all the lunches and went to all the PTA meetings and field trips. And we still have a child who is crying out for help. So I think the first thing that I try to help the parents understand is that this is not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Our children learn how to cope with things, not just from our family unit, but from all of the other influences that they're surrounded by. And so I try to provide a space so that the guilt that parents walk in with is respected and is met with a warm embrace, because I don't want to add to that. And then I try to figure out what the expectation is. Like, what do you want to learn what the red flags are? Do you want to learn how to set healthier boundaries, how to hold your no? Do you want to know like how to engage in treatment? So I try to gauge and understand what it is they are specifically wanting to learn. And then we just kind of walk through it and then provide the support and the coaching and experience, the encouragement that is needed, because it's not easy. And especially when, if me as an adult is going to get upset if somebody asks me if I've, I'm not balancing my life well and it looks like I'm struggling. Imagine that tenfold to a child, because, it's that instant defense that's going to come up, and the biggest fit is going to happen. First of all, probably because they're going to get upset that you figured them out and you're calling them out on something. And then secondly, it's like, how dare you? You don't know me. You don't understand me kind of language would typically start to come out. And that can be hard to hear, because they know all of our emotional buttons to push to make us, that emotional guilt then gets stronger. And then we don't feel comfortable. Sometimes we cave.
Yeah, right. Well, and there's also that social piece, and even kind of a tag along with the, legalization of medical marijuana. And it sends a lot of mixed messages to teenagers, I think. So just even kind of thinking about, just like anything else is legal, cigarettes, marijuana, alcohol, right? Like figuring out what those limits are is often left to the individual. Right. And so, and I guess any thoughts on that, or any suggestions for how you sort of navigate that line of, medically helpful versus crossing over into abuse?
Yeah. So there's a lot of research out there, and I know that medicinal marijuana is used for other things that are like seizure-oriented glaucoma, stuff like that. So I'm not a medical doctor. I don't want to step on that area. But when it comes to substance use disorder and brain chemistry, when it comes to addiction, what I know is that a child's brain is still developing. Their prefrontal cortex, all of that is still under development until 21, I believe. I might be off, but I believe it's 21. So just like with alcohol and cigarettes, where there's a legal age for consumption in the United States around there, for children, you want to be mindful of how any kind of illicit substance is going to impact the continued development of the brain and body and nervous system. I feel that education is power. I think if somebody is looking at this as something that they want to explore, be it a young adult or an older adult, that you read up on the literature, you really do your research, because there's so many different types, right? The medical marijuana, you have CBD, you have tinctures, you have vapes, you have, edibles, you have all of the different things that could be utilized. And there's different reasons for the different types that are available. You also have to be mindful if you have psychosis, or if you have the other types of brain imbalances, that you could be messing with things before they're fully healed, and you could be creating more damage than good, under the auspices that it's natural and automatically it's better. So it's very important that you educate yourself before you engage in any kind of, medication assisted treatment. I recommend, and I encourage anybody, before they start taking medicine from any doctor, that they research what they are putting into their system, because that's important. And you can't advocate for yourself and learn how to take care of yourself if you don't know what's going into your body first. So I always want to advocate for education first, and then based off of that information, then making the best decision for you after consulting the professionals in the field, and not just somebody down the street who says it makes them feel better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think, alongside that, it's like, yes, you absolutely should be, sharing with your primary care doctor any medications, anything that you are doing. I think they should probably be doing a better job of asking those questions because it makes a huge difference. And I think that, that is where mental health professionals can come in, not as a medical doctor, but in that advocacy role. And in that, let's have a conversation and really get a sense of, just like we would be asking about anything else, how's your sleep, how's your eating? We really want to know, well, what are you taking? What else are you using to support yourself? And, I think that I appreciate your answer because it's probably still, too soon to tell maybe in a lot of ways how all of this is going to balance itself out. But we know that it's happening and we know that it does serve, there are valid reasons, right? Like you have to have a medical diagnosis. And so it's one of those things that I think is sort of connected to other areas where, we stay silent. We're not sharing. We're isolated. We're, not really having anybody to listen without trying to give us advice, right? And that's where everybody needs a therapist.
I do. You bring up a good point too, and it was when you said medical, and there is a significant difference between the medical grade marijuana and CBD products versus the street marijuana that you're going to get from somebody. And people are like, oh, well, I know my hookup from years ago and I trust them. The amount of fentanyl and carfentanil that is in this area is scary. And there's a lot of cross contamination. And I don't know how much our listeners know about the fentanyl and how it is transported through the system, but it is very easily absorbed through the skin. And so people who are very savvy, what I would consider long-term users in the area are getting sick because of the fentanyl. So when you have young kids who think, oh, it's just weed, what we are coming up against is people who are overdosing at high rates due to fentanyl exposure, and their weed is being contaminated with the fentanyl. So you're having kids that are going to parties thinking, oh, I'm just going to take a hit off this joint. And then they end up falling out in an overdose state and they don't even know what hit them. And it's scary. And it's something that is a very serious situation. And if somebody is considering medical marijuana, I am going to strongly advocate that they do it the correct way and not just buy it off of the street.
Thank you for highlighting that, because I don't, unless it's impacted you, my guess is that most people don't know how dangerous, how deadly it is, and just how prevalent it is. Okay, well, that's a lot of whew.
Yes.
But this is it, right? This is reality and life and navigating the challenges that we're all trying to figure out a way to navigate, coupled with, how do we still stay connected? How do we still stay grounded in whatever brings us joy? I think, I don't think I know that access to mental health care is one of the key ingredients for having more joy in your life. And just wondering if you want to just touch on, just from your bird's eye view as a therapist, as an expert in treating trauma and substance use, what are the obstacles that need to be removed? You mentioned stigma. What are the other ways that we can really become a culture of caring? Right. And a culture where we take care of each other.
So barriers are a very real thing, right? Barriers can be, think about when you are making an appointment with a new doctor, right? First of all, we got to call our insurance company and see who accepts our insurance. And then we have to go through the laundry list of doctors to see who is accepting new clients or patients. And then we have to call and wait on hold. And maybe sometimes we're calling on our lunch break and they also take lunch and then they close at 5, but we get out of work at 4:30. And so, you know where I'm going with this. So when somebody is moving through treatment, now I'm going to take an example of because I've worked with a very large number of homeless folks in our local tri-state area, Western Maryland, Washington County type of folks. So first of all, they're homeless and they're addicted to illicit substances and they're struggling. And so it's like, what do you do? And a lot of folks end up in a homeless shelter, and there's not that many homeless shelters. A lot of them are full. So what are the supports available? Because I could get on my soapbox and talk about this for another hour, Julie, and I don't want to do that, but we're talking about barriers. So it's understanding what the resources are in the community. It's understanding then how to access those resources and then put them all together. There's not one place to go. You've got to go over here to social services to get your EBT and your disability and all of that. Then you have to go over on this side of town and you've got to sign up and go to the job center and apply for jobs. And then you can go over to this program over here and get a voucher that then you can go over here to get 5 articles of clothing and a pair of shoes for free. And then I have to put it all in a sack and figure out where I'm going to sleep for the night because I still don't have a job yet, but I'm going to go over here because I got my EBT card that's going to get me into the food bank so I can have something to eat for dinner. But then I get to get up and maybe spend $10 a month on my membership at a local gym that allows me to take a shower every day. And it just doesn't stop for them. And then I'm supposed to think about staying sober in the midst of all of this. So it's reducing the barriers and figuring out where I can help people bridge the gap. So if that means I've made a community connection with somebody at social services, if somebody comes to me, I'm going to be like, look, I know Miss Sue over here. You tell her that Stephanie sent you, and this is the application you need to ask for, and I need you to fill out X, Y, and Z. And I will write it out for them, because they got to get over the fear of walking in the door, and then they got to get over the fear of asking the right questions, and then they got to get over the fear of the rejection piece, like, oh, you went to the wrong place. You got to go here first and then come back to see me. So it's learning the community resources, learning how to navigate those community resources in order, and then walking somebody through each step so that they have their basic needs met before they can even think about the healing process. But the cool thing about all of that is that when you work so closely with somebody through all of those steps, by the time you get to the point that you're getting into the trauma, they're going to be like, Miss Steph, I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. Because you've done follow through with everything you have said. So you've built that trust and rapport early on that they're going to be like, all right, well, if you tell me to go journal, I guess I'm going to go journal. And they do it. And so it's a habitual thing at this point. And then it just naturally grows into that healing. And they're finding joy all through all of those things. And they're trusting the healing process because you haven't abandoned them. And you have followed through with what you said you would follow through with. And you haven't judged them along the way.
Yeah, thank you for, giving us that glimpse, like walking in the stepping into the shoes, the reality that's out there. And that empathy piece is so important. I think, continuing to lift the voices of marginalized folks and continuing to repeat those words, mental health matter, healthcare matters. And just really appreciate you diving into that with us. Do you have one or two, whether it's a quote or an online resource or something that might be useful to our listeners today who have listened to, this rich sharing that you've offered? Anything come to mind of a resource or a quote that you'd like to share?
It's interesting you asked me that because I'm such a quote person. Like I'll take screenshots of all of these different ones that I just really find inspirational that day. But the one thing that sticks with me, and it was one of my first clients that I ever had, And she created a vision board, and she wrote on a Post-it for me. She goes, "My goal is to do better than I did yesterday." And so I've asked her if I could keep it, and I've carried it with me all of these years, and it's like a tattered little yellow Post-it now, but I treasure it, because if all I can do is to do better than I did yesterday, then I consider it a win. Doesn't matter how big or small, but as long as I stayed focused and I tried to do better than I did yesterday, then I'm moving in the right direction. And eventually I will get there.
Beautiful. I love that. My goal is to do better than I did yesterday.
Yeah, no matter how big or small, you just do better than you did yesterday, and you eventually get to where you need to be.
Wonderful. All right. Stephanie Snyder, thank you so much for joining us today and lifting up such an important conversation and furthering that access to joy that we all were born with. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to The Joy Factor. For more information, visit www.thejoyfactorpodcast.com.